I'm gonna keep it real with you, Chief. Like 30% of the reason I'm doing this video is for the title. As per usual, I am fashionably late to the topic. This video came out early September, then October, November, December, January, and early February, so 5 months. I've been later to stuff. I was very busy, okay? I was working on a haunted house in October. I was doing stuff in November. I got jury duty in December. My computer broke and I had to get a new one in January. And then I got sick. All the while, the victims of the last organized harassment campaign I had to deal with decided to do their own organized harassment campaign, so I had to deal with that. But I'm back with another classic yearly Idiotocin upload. Honestly, I just need an excuse to get back into like the video making grind. Inside of me there are two wolves. One is nonverbal, the other is a yapper. I will be responding to this video a little bit anachronistically. It won't just be from beginning to end, because I feel like that'll fit the flow a little better. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it.
I showed a tweet by Drinker that I thought made it painfully obvious what his positions on black people in the media were.
A screenshot from the Minecraft movie trailer?
What I didn't account for was the insane mental gymnastics people would perform in order to deny that his post was racist in nature.
Probably because it's a screenshot from the Minecraft movie trailer. Yeah, so the insane mental gymnastics this guy is using is saying that the image is probably about it being a cheaply thrown together cash grab that exists to capitalize on a trend. Like, yeah, that first one is just the opinion that everyone had on that trailer. Even the people defending the movie don't disagree that it's a shameless piece of shit cash grab. They just think it's okay that it's a shameless piece of shit cash grab because it's made for children and children deserve shit.
Intended for children.
And then they go on to say that it's weird for you to focus on the fact that there's a black person in the picture when that black person is only one of multiple people in the picture and not even the most prominently featured. Like, are you making the assumption that something is inherently focused on race if it has a black person in it? Okay, take that stance if you want. So then your defense is just to quote the person back to themselves and say lol, because that's what people who are enjoyable to talk to do. And then you ask him if he knows who that guy is. So the thing that you said was painfully obvious evidence of racism only actually reads as racism if you have background information on the person who said it. And then according to you, you've got a different part in your video where you play audio from that same person. And then the proof that he's racist, according to you, is that he saw a movie that wasn't about race and thought that it was about race, which wouldn't inherently make someone racist. It would just mean that they saw something where it didn't actually exist. I'm pretty sure every person has at some point in their life seen a thing, thought it was racist, and then it turned out not to be. Hopefully it won't turn out to be the case that you've ever done something like that as well. Then you're like digging into this guy, telling him that he'll finally understand when he listens to the audio, when apparently it wasn't even clear that the audio was from the same person. Like, you had to tell him that it was the same guy. They're in two completely different parts of your video. And then you even joke that it's like a virtue on his part that he didn't know who he was, but also you already expected him to know because it's crucial information for him to understand the point you're making. And you called him stupid for not understanding the point you were making. And then you quote him saying that jumping to conclusions is bad, and then just respond with Lamau! Exclamation point. When, as far as he was concerned, you were jumping to conclusions. The only way he would have been able to tell how you came to this conclusion was if he was just able to intuit information about a guy he didn't know anything about, or just intuit that this one tweet from this one guy in one part of your video, and this clip from a movie review in another part of your video were actually from the same guy all along.
Here's a tweet from a different person.
Oh, cool. A different person.
Nick Fuentes, a proud white supremacist. Sounds contradictory, I know, what with being a Mexican and having a name like Fuentes.
Well, having the last name Fuentes is just a byproduct of being Mexican. Like, if he was white and he had the last name Fuentes, then him being a white supremacist would, well, I was going to say it would make sense, but, you know, it would make as much sense as being a white supremacist could.
While being a white supremacist, but no one ever said white supremacists were intelligent.
Okay, I'm nitpicking here, but the way you phrased that made it sound like he started off as a white supremacist and then he chose to be Mexican.
Doesn't this tweet seem to be placing emphasis on a specific character in the Minecraft movie?
Yes, it is!
I mean, now that I've told you this person is a white supremacist, it's obvious what his issue is, isn't it?
Assuming that what you've said is true, which from what I know about Nick Fuentes, yeah, it is, then yeah. And also, I didn't need you to point it out to me. If I know who Nick Fuentes is, then it's very obvious. You don't need to tell me that there's only one person in this cropped image.
So I'll ask again. What do you honestly think Will's problem with this image was?
The same thing that comment pointed out to you, and the same thing that everyone else on planet Earth thinks. The characters look ugly, their outfits look ugly, the environment they're in looks ugly, they look out of place in that environment, and it doesn't look like the game it's meant to be an adaptation of. So, your smoking gun for why Nick Fuentes' tweet was racist was because he cropped it to just the black woman. And so now you've extended this to a different person who didn't crop it to just her, and included the entire main cast of the movie, and also the clothes that they're wearing, and also the background that they're in front of, like you've lost the actual connection to the proof that you had for the other guy. Also, it was another guy.
Do you really believe he's this upset about Jason Momoa's character here?
Yes, everyone is. Look at him. Look at his fit, dog. Look at the top of his head. Also, Jason Momoa is not white.
Hold that thought. We're just getting started.
There seems to be a bit of a debate going on about whether or not this movie is woke, mainly because of the demographics of certain characters. And to be fair, there is a bit of evidence to support this claim. If I was a cynical man, I'd say it's kind of interesting that the rich, corrupt scumbags targeted by the Riddler all happen to be straight, white, middle-aged men, but hey, I guess that's just a total coincidence.
Seriously, what the fuck does this movie have to do with race?
One of the main characters of the movie outright says that all of the bad guys involved in this plot are white.
He has straight white men in his mouth so often, you'd think he was an escort.
You okay there, champ? What does that mean? Why did you say that? Like, I get the men in your mouth thing, but like, are white people more known for hiring sex workers?
If he applied even a little of that gray matter, maybe he'd come to the conclusion that most rich people in our society tend to be white men. The Riddler was going after police officers and politicians, and again, in our society, they tend to be white.
It's amazing how quickly we went from this movie didn't say anything about race to it actually makes total sense that it would make all the villains one race.
What Drinker is asking for here is diversity.
Oh, that's good. We want that, right?
But only amongst the villains of the film.
Well, if it already exists among the heroes and among the supporting characters, then the only people left to add it to would be the villains. Like, if the argument is that this movie includes some sort of racial message about race relations between white people and non-white people, which, once again, a character in the movie literally says all the bad guys are white, then yeah, pointing out that every aspect of the movie is racially diverse, except the villains who are all one race, would be a fair thing to use as evidence in favor of that.
Moreover, what he's conveniently leaving out is Riddler also attempted to assassinate the mayor-elect, a black woman.
Okay, so the operative part of the phrase,
The rich, corrupt scumbags targeted by the Riddler,
is not the targeted by the Riddler part, it's the rich, corrupt scumbags part. If anything, this aids his point. The one person he targets outside of the hero of the movie himself, who isn't corrupt, is the one person who is a different race and gender.
If all of this wasn't baffling enough, he himself states this film isn't about race.
and to be fair, Kravitz and Jeffrey Wright both do a great job with the roles they're given, and apart from one poorly judged line from Catwoman right at the end, race never really comes into the picture. So I guess what I'm saying here is that while the movie takes a few little stabs at modern day social issues, it really never dominates the narrative.
Does he even hear himself?
Do you? He agreed with you. You think the movie's not about race at all? He thinks the movie's not about race. 99%. He did bring up that one line where a character literally says all the bad guys are white. So I guess he only 99% agrees with you, which, maybe that's not good enough for you. For what it's worth, he only 99% agrees with me. I actually would be a little bit harsher on that line than he was. Like, I like that movie, and also The Penguin's out now, and it's very good, and you should watch it too. But that line from Catwoman is really out of place in a movie that is otherwise entirely not about race. Yeah, let it be remembered, all of this was leading up to him not concluding that this movie was about race. This was not him building a case for why the movie was actually woke. This was him looking at the evidence for and the evidence against, and then at the end concluding, nuh-uh. Like, the narrative you've built up here is that Drinker, completely unprompted, made this movie about race when it said nothing about race, to prove that it was woke. None of that sentence is true. It was not unprompted. He was responding to other people who called the movie woke. He did not make it about race. He concluded that it wasn't about race. The movie isn't completely absent of talk about race. One of the main characters literally references all the bad guys being white. And he did not conclude the movie was woke. You got it all wrong.
Conservatives do this thing.
Yeah, this has not aged well. I mean, it already didn't age well before the sex crime allegations. Destiny was already a goblin man before this, but now it really doesn't age well. But let's hear what Mr. Steny has to say.
Where they'll sit in a room, they'll watch a girl and a guy go into the other room, and they'll hear her screaming for 30 minutes and then come back out like bloodied and bruised, and you'll be like, bro, did that guy just beat the shit out of her? And the conservatives will look you in the eye, dead in the eye, into the ovals of your soul. They will look into you, and they will say, I didn't actually see it happen. Did you? How can you improve that? Like, why would you assume that? Do you even fucking know? Like, they're the most shameless bad faith people need. They're shameless.
Okay, so I don't know why you, who started off your video by saying that you're not partisan and you actually criticize both the left and the right.
Firstly, I am not a political type. I rarely, if ever, bring up politics, and when I do, it's usually to make fun of them, left or right. For this behavior, I have been routinely called right-wing and left-wing by people who make politics their entire identity. My position is that political folk are mirror images of each other participating in the Spider-Man meme, where they blame each other for doing exactly what they themselves are doing. I think it's silly to adhere to political sides because at some point in time, you're going to have to defend nonsense to maintain the integrity of being on that side. The only side I'm on is reason, logic, facts, science, and math.
Are now taking just a general all-around bad trait and saying that it's a conservative thing specifically? I also don't know why you needed a clip of Destiny specifically, the goblin man that he is, describing a brutal domestic abuse scenario to get across the general point that people deny obvious things just because they didn't see it personally. This reminds me, I'm going on a tangent now. I saw a TikTok once where somebody said that women were more emotional than men, and rather than be normal about it and respond with, actually that's not true, someone instead decided to respond by just hard cutting to a video of domestic abuse. It was a video of just a man dragging his wife and child out of a car into the middle of the road and battering them, which is a really cool thing to just suddenly have blasted in front of your face. And then after that video, he just did like a weird little dance where like the camera was like stabilized on his face so everything else was moving, like that Pennywise the Clown dance from It, and then just had like a wall of text overlaid over it, just bragging about how much better he was than other men because he knew that actually it's men who are the emotional ones and not women. He didn't say those words out loud, he just put the text on screen over himself dancing because that's how we communicate information now. And also, he made sure to jump scare me with graphic displays of domestic abuse before doing that. I hate that man. I wish nothing but suffering upon him. Anyway, back to this video.
One of the tactics of grifters and their parrots is to attempt to maintain an air of plausible deniability so that when they are criticized for their bigotry, they can hide behind deflections. In my previous video, I brought up one of them, the "but Ripley from Alien" defense. In short, these people try to use examples that match or are similar to the identity of a group that they regularly target to pretend they are not prejudiced against that group.
Right, like claiming you're not partisan because you go after both the left and the right, even though you attribute a very broad, negative character trait to the right wing specifically.
In political discourse, this is probably more well known as, "but I have black friends." We know that doesn't actually work as a defense because we have actual history of slave owners falling in love with their slaves and that male sexists still love their female family members.
Right, that is correct. But to elaborate a little further, the reason why saying you have black friends isn't a good counter against accusations of racism is because in a situation where somebody thinks that a certain race is like inherently worse or inherently a certain way, or they're inherently distrustful of people from a certain race, whatever it may be, them expressing a belief that's racist doesn't suddenly get nullified by them being on good terms with somebody from that race. But if somebody got accused of being racist because, for example, they weren't friends with someone who was black, then pointing out that they are friends with other people who are black would be a good counter against that. So if your accusations of racism or sexism or whatever else, are you just assuming that the person has racist beliefs as an explanation for why they didn't like a movie that features someone of a certain race or a certain gender or whatever else? Then them pointing out that they've liked other movies with a black lead or a female lead or whatever else would be a good counter against that. Like, you can't just say, oh, just because you liked a movie with one strong female lead in it doesn't mean you're not sexist. When your accusation of sexism was itself based off of them not liking a movie with a strong female lead in it. Also, it is very funny seeing you cite the "some of my best friends are black" defense, when your argument against all of the corrupt politicians in the Batman being white was, yeah, well, one of them was black.
But when you have sustained and consistent campaigns against certain groups of people,
Your illustration of a sustained campaign against a group of people is your own mock-up of a thumbnail that you're mostly just criticizing for having bad graphic design, that has one woman in it, Brie Larson, who is not women, she is one woman, a woman who works at Hollywood and a few years ago was very prominent in Hollywood, a woman who was very outspoken about her beliefs and about her goal to incorporate her beliefs into the project she works on. From the same people who brought you the "I can't be racist, one of my best friends is black" argument comes the "well, of course you're sexist, one of the people you made negative YouTube videos about is a woman" argument. Also, oh my god, Brie Larson, look out. Michael Myers is after you.
it's entirely reasonable to suggest you have a dislike for those groups. For Will, one of those groups is women.
Immediately after showing your own mockery of a bad YouTube thumbnail, you then show another thumbnail, not made by Drinker, made by somebody else about him, that has just all the pitfalls of the thumbnail you were making fun of, except now it's saying something you agree with, so you're cool with it.
Wait a minute, is that Organized Chaos? Oh my god, I know who that is. That guy's a goblin.
Yo, throwback to the time that Organized Chaos did a live stream reacting to a review of Doctor Strange 2, and he specifically skipped to the part of the review where it showed America Chavez's mom's getting sucked through a portal because a bee landed on her hand, because he was hoping that the review would say something homophobic about her having two moms. But then when the review just spent the whole time making fun of the fact that this information got revealed by them accidentally going to a memory store where you can step on a pad and it will like scan your brain and shoot your memories out onto a screen for you to watch, because I guess the writers of that movie didn't know what flashbacks are. He just spent like the whole time sitting there grumpily, getting really mad at them for making fun of the memory store. And he also got like really mad at them for suggesting that they could have just revealed this by having the two characters talk to each other.
Okay, I'm gonna rewind it a little bit. I'm actually kind of interested what he says about America Chavez's parents. I like how they're bitching about it, but their grand fucking solution is, oh yeah, let's have them do some dialogue. How creative, dude. Brilliant suggestion is fucking dialogue? Jeez. Yes, this is lazy, but having them do dialogue...
Getting sucked through the wormhole.
You want to see your mom's get sucked through an interdimensional vortex wormhole in 4K?
Wow, are they gonna spend like 20 minutes on this goddamn bee? Well, I guess he doesn't make a big deal about her having two moms. He just spends an hour talking about fucking bees.
Hold on. Organized Chaos did a stream with the Birdman? Oh, the rabbit hole keeps getting deep. ActualFandom is there. Oh, keep that in your back pocket. There's lore on him too, but we'll get to that later.
Let's examine one of the most egregious cases of Will's attempts at plausible deniability.
All right, guys, this isn't just an ordinary case. This is an egregious case. This one's gonna knock it out of the park.
But for the life of me, I'll never understand why they cast Gina Carano. I mean, she's big and burly, and she obviously knows what she's doing when it comes to the fight scenes, but she's a fucking cage fighter, not an actor. Watching her trying to emote is almost as painful as watching Brie Larson trying to be funny. Oh well, it could have been worse. They could have cast Ronda Rousey.
Pretty obvious he dislikes this person and thinks she shouldn't be an actor.
No, it is not obvious he thinks that. He never said anything about disliking her. He only said that her acting was bad. The only way you could say that this means he dislikes her is if you said he dislikes her as an actor, but you made those two separate points.
Fair enough.
I like how your argument is that he attacks women in the film industry, and then after the first example you give, you go, yeah, actually, fair enough. It's good that he said this about her.
However, later that year, Gina got into a string of spats on Twitter that had her facing accusations of racism and bigotry, and she was subsequently fired by Disney. Then, a few months later, Drinker makes a video about Gina so embarrassing, you just have to hear it to believe it.
Gather round, dear viewer, as I tell you a tale. It's the tale of a woman who stood tall in the face of jealousy, cowardice, hatred, and vengeance.
Oh, is it because he's doing like the poetic storyteller voice? Like, you know, that's a bit, right?
Her triumph was cemented when the king and queen chose her to play a soldier, fighting amongst the stars themselves.
Like, you know, he doesn't actually think that Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger are a king and queen, right? Like, Disney's not a country, as much as they probably wish they were.
Her fame was growing fast, but sadly, so was her list of enemies.
This is a flip-flop so insane, it could put Crocs and Birkenstock out of business.
God, this guy thinks he's a lot funnier than he actually is. Yeah, so in what way is that a flip-flop? First, he's saying that her acting's not very good, and then he's saying that she shouldn't have been fired from her acting job for reasons unrelated to her acting.
And this isn't even the only video he's made about her. Listen to this nonsense.
Oh, okay, he has more. Let's let him finish.
One of the problems with hiring strong independent women to work at your company instead of the usual assemblage of soft, entitled, like-minded corporate drones that have never had an original thought in their entire lives.
I will say it is kind of weird for him to use Rachel Zegler as the B-roll for his example of a corporate drone, given that, if anything, her problem was kind of the opposite. Like, she got hired to play Snow White, and she was like, yeah, Snow White kind of sucks, actually.
They don't always think, say, or do the things that you want them to. Case in point, Gina Carano, a former women's MMA fighter turned actor who was brought in to play Cara Dune on The Mandalorian, and at first, all seemed well. The show was a success and Carano's character soon became a fan favourite. Unfortunately, she began to ruffle feathers behind the scenes at Disney Lucasfilm by refusing to spout the same politically acceptable talking points as everyone else at the company, and even dared to express some conservative political views at times.
He spoke about this person like she was a dog.
No, he did not talk about her like she was a dog. He said she couldn't act.
Outright saying she can't even act, but as soon as she spouts nonsense and conspiracy theories and gets fired for her troubles, he's writing poems and puff pieces.
Oh, okay, so you know the thing he said was that she couldn't act. So what extra thing is being added on top of that brings it from criticism of an actor's acting ability to you are a dog? Also, might I remind you, you said fair enough to his initial criticism. So do you think it's fair to talk about women like they're dogs?
But for the life of me, I'll never understand why they cast Gina Carano.
Thank you for showing me the exact same clip you showed me before, but with emojis on it. That way I know the correct thing to think about it.
This man is shameless. If it isn't obvious by now,
it's not.
He has a clear political agenda, and this colors his work. Before he knew she shared political opinions that align with his grift,
Has he made any videos about vaccines? Or did you just make that up? You just made up that he had that belief? Because you've not proven it. Currently, your only evidence that he has any negative thoughts about vaccines is that he defended someone from getting fired from an acting job for posting about vaccines. And you didn't even actually show her posting about vaccines. The closest you've got is her posting about government-mandated lockdowns, which are a different thing than vaccines.
She was a girl boss, only here to promote Kathleen Kennedy's woke agenda.
That is straight up just not a thing he said. You made that up right now.
And shouldn't have even been cast.
I guess that's technically true.
But now, she's a shield he can use to deflect criticism about his obvious disdain for strong female characters.
You have not made that obvious either. The main thing he praised her for initially was her ability to fight. That does not prove a hatred of strong female characters. The singular negative thing you've showed him say about her was that a boxer was good at boxing and not at acting. And you seem to agree with that, and even said worse things about her, and then seem to agree with those worse things.
You know, look over here and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Has spoken! Who are you?
Thank you for replaying that Wizard of Oz clip that you played as B-roll when you said it initially. That way I would know it was from the Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain is a very well-known phrase. You did not have to tell me it was from the Wizard of Oz. People who have not seen the Wizard of Oz are still familiar with that phrase.
Speaking of agendas, the Barbie movie and his subsequent analysis evaporated any hope I had left for this man's integrity. Listen to how he sums up the marketing of the film and then his reading of the actual film's release.
Now, before I dive into this review properly, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work and genius PR campaign of the Warner Brothers marketing department. You guys really pulled off a miracle with this one, successfully duping all of us, including me, into believing that Barbie was going to be just another colourful, light-hearted, easygoing family comedy with some cheeky, self-aware humour, ironic meta-gags, and probably capped off with a blandly inoffensive female empowerment message about girls learning the value of their own potential. What none of us expected was 114 minutes of spiteful, bitter, mean-spirited, borderline unhinged hatred of men and everything even vaguely associated with them. Barbie is like the deformed, mutated rage child of Captain Marvel, Ghostbusters 2016 and She-Hulk. It is pure brain cancer in movie form, and I was genuinely shocked by the sheer, undisguised contempt this film has towards 50% of the human population.
Besides the fact that this is one of the most hyperbolic, nonsensical summations of this movie.
Are you gonna get into that? Or are you just gonna say it's hyperbolic and expect us all to agree with you? Like, surely his description of what he thinks this movie's views are on the interplay between men and women would be like the key thing you would want to focus on if you're trying to argue that he's got a political bias based on his perception of men and women that like paints how he views movies. Like, if his channel's supposed to be some like secret hub for misogyny, you'd think that this video would be the one that would be like filled to the brim with it. But no, we're just going to show the thesis statement of what he said and just move on. Well, until you give your take on what you think the movie's actually about, since nobody even seems to agree what the movie's actually about, I'm going to stick with the GOAT Hassan Piker's interpretation of the movie.
The toy movie, it is a capitalist product sale that's being wrapped up in like a feel-good message. Using your feminine powers of like pitting men against one another which ultimately devolves into like men and their interest of competition leading into war, which is like a very classic, like liberal ass. It's like a very classic liberal take on obviously how history has occurred. It's like the exact opposite of historical materialism. Oh yeah, men are cum-brained and violent because women pin them against one another, and it also kind of takes away from like women's role in society as well, because it's not just like women are not only weaponizing their sexuality to dominate and manipulate men. That is like kind of a very incel take. It's literally it's not real. It's not a real movie. But why was there no equality? You sound like a feminist, literally begging for equality, like a chirping rat femme. Men used to die in war, okay? Men used to do things. They used to build things. They used to die in fucking war. If you watch the Barbie movie and it makes you feel this sad, like you should follow through on that desire, that sense of despair. You know what I mean? If you can't fucking deal with a toy movie for both children and adults, you're not built for this world. You know, just shut it off. You know what I mean? Just quit movies. Maybe quit everything altogether. You know what I mean? It's not for you. It's not happening. Just turn it off.
Thank you, Hassan. I can always count on you.
How could he have possibly come to that conclusion for the film's marketing? It was plainly obvious that Margot's Barbie was the main character.
Did he say otherwise? Did he say he thought Ken was going to be the main character of Barbie? That was not the issue he took with this, according to the clip you played.
And that she would face an existential crisis.
Did he ever say that he thought she wasn't going to face an existential crisis?
Do you guys ever think about dying?
Once again, what does somebody suddenly thinking about their own mortality have to do with the dynamics between men and women?
On top of that, they show Barbie's feet going flat.
What?
Suggesting that the film would be clearly feminist in nature.
How?
As feminists have been arguing against heels for decades.
Oh, that's how. Well, you must not be familiar with the DLC update patch that feminism got when Jurassic World came out. I have like a very distinct memory of this having happened. So like the default criticism that people had initially whenever a woman in an action movie had like heels on was that it was stupid and it was impractical because it would make it difficult for her to like walk and run in them. But then Jurassic World came out and people started making that same criticism. But because people liked that movie and liked that character in that movie, then the argument switched to, oh, come on. You really think so lowly of women that you think that they can't run in heels? Women have been running in heels their whole lives. They know how to do this. Get with the program. I'm being a little bit facetious with that. But to go to my broader point, there are also many feminists who hold up high heels as like a symbol of female empowerment. I remember there was a scene in Black Panther, yes, I'm going on another tangent, where one of like the guards stabbed someone with a high heel shoe, and someone called that stupid. And then someone else called that guy stupid for thinking it was stupid, because he missed the important symbolism that she was stabbing that guy with a symbol of femininity, and therefore it was female empowerment. Remember when movie criticism was about movies? But back to the point at hand, feminists have called absolutely everything anti-women, and have also called absolutely everything pro-women, is the main point I'm really getting at here. And also, besides all of that, was he really supposed to glean all of that from a 2-second shot in the trailer of her feet changing shape? Surely the more intuitive read of that is that because she turned from a doll into a real person, her doll feet turned into real person feet. It's funny, your whole criticism of him is that he's like reaching and stretching to try and find like political interpretations in everything he sees. And now you're criticizing him for not having had a political interpretation of the doll's doll feet turning into human feet when she turns human. He was supposed to see that and go, ah yes, this is clearly going to have a political message. Like, imagine a world where the Barbie movie actually did end up being what he described. Just like Fat Albert, but for skinny white women. And he had made a video responding to the trailer, thinking it was going to be this like political feminist movie, 'cause a bitch foot changed shape. You would absolutely be using this as an example of his political bias, making him see wokeness everywhere, even where it didn't exist. Also, did he ever say that he didn't want it to be feminist? He didn't use the word feminist, but he said he was expecting it to have a female empowerment message at the end, and that he'd be fine with that. So the issue he had wasn't with the concept, it was with the execution.
The marketing material also shows Barbie entering the real world and experiencing sexual assault
Once again, surely the most intuitive read of that scene, going only off of the trailer, would be that in Barbie Land everything's perfect, and in real life awful things happen. I guess this one makes a little bit more sense because, well, no, actually I guess it doesn't make more sense because sexual assault is done both by men and women and both to men and women. But I understand that the pop culture perception of sexual assault is that it's the bad thing that men do to women. And also to the Joker. I do have to include that. That's a software patch update that got recently.
And I can only conclude that Drinker's media literacy is questionable at best.
You said the secret word!
I couldn't find a good clip from the actual Pee-wee's Playhouse, so I had to use the Family Guy version. I'm sorry for any distress this has caused anyone.
This is not the first time he's been caught manipulating a narrative. The YouTuber Pillar of Garbage exposed Drinker for lying about scenes in Glass Onion because Drinker has a political gripe with Rian Johnson.
Do you have proof that he has a political gripe against him and not just that he thinks his movies suck? Like, even if he does have a bias against Rian Johnson, he could just be biased against him because he thinks his movies suck, and therefore is more likely to say that his next movie is gonna suck because he thought all his previous movies sucked.
The director of Glass Onion and The Last Jedi.
Oh yeah, there's your evidence of a political bias, is that he said other movies he made sucked.
A film he and his ilk
His ilk. Calm the fuck down.
have pilloried for the past 7 years.
For the past 7 years, you've got 2 videos on screen, both made years ago, made a year apart from each other. One's about the movie in general. Okay, it says part 1, so I guess that means there's actually 3. And the other's about one character in it specifically, who's a returning character from other movies. Calm down, dude. It's 3 YouTube videos, 2 of which are really just 2 halves of a single video.
Because of perceived wokeness.
Do you have any proof of that? Other than just that he's made mucho YouTube videos about it? We're really leaning into the just put stuff on screen that vaguely looks like what I'm talking about, and the audience will just kind of absorb it territory. I'm getting Brittany Venti flashbacks from this.
Here's a clip.
Batista's watching his girlfriend supposedly having an affair with Miles, only to be observed by Blanc.
Why did you put his title and channel name in like a separate box over the actual video? Just screen record the whole thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's fine.
Now look at the later version of this exact same scene. Noticed how Helen's been added in here when she totally should have been visible before.
Except, no, that isn't true. There's a reason the Drinker plays these clips on mute.
'Cause he's talking.
That was the first time we see this. There's a close shot of Duke, then we hear the twig snap, and then we pull back to a shot revealing Blanc. Here's the scene as we're shown it later on. We start with this slightly wider shot, revealing Blanc and Helen, then Helen leaves, causing that sound, and Duke turns round. This point is the moment we saw earlier on, and there's a very obvious, very obtrusive sound cue, the sole purpose of which is to communicate precisely this.
Okay. You seem to be correct on that. Consider the following though. What if he didn't notice it? Because if someone didn't realize that's what that branch breaking was supposed to indicate, what would they be left seeing? They'd see the first scene, where Daniel Craig Disney channels himself out from behind a tree and then goes back in. And then they'd see the second scene, which is almost identical to the first scene, seemingly on purpose, where Daniel Craig +1 Disney channels themselves out from behind the tree. And if you don't realize that in one of those scenes the branch breaking happens before, and then the other, the branch breaking happens after, then you're not going to realize that those 2 scenes were supposed to take place one after the other. It will just look like they showed you the same scene twice, but with a new actor added in retroactively. Like, yeah, he got it wrong. But is it that unreasonable of a thing to get wrong? The read that he had makes complete sense if you disregard the branch breaking. Or not even if you disregard it breaking, if you don't realize that it broke at the beginning of one shot and at the end of another shot.
You can enjoy the way moments like this toy with the audience perspective, complementing the film's themes, these ideas of how we see and how we falsely composite and rationalize these perceptions away from the truth, away from what's really plainly shown to us, or you can dislike it.
I like how there's a little paragraph that goes along with the "you can like this scene" part of that sentence to really throw every reason why you should like that scene at you, and then it just ends with, or you could dislike it. You couldn't just say you could like it or dislike it. Also, that scene sucks ass anyway. Them showing you that the other lady was there all along too doesn't actually, like, add anything. The initial scene makes it look like Daniel Craig sees Dave Bautista catching his wife cheating, and then the second scene shows that Dave Bautista was actually sending his wife to honeypot someone. Daniel Craig's character knew that both times, and throwing in the other character doesn't add anything to that. The information wasn't being hidden from Daniel Craig in universe. It was just being hidden from the audience. So that later on the movie could go, actually, nuh-uh. Remember when that movie ends with Daniel Craig not stopping the murderer? And so he just lets his friend get away with destroying the Mona Lisa so that they can blame the other guy for destroying the Mona Lisa.
But what you can't do is lie about how the film constructs moments like these on a mechanical level. And that's what the drinker does here to cap off his video, to build into this last point.
Or he just got something wrong. Not everything someone says that's untrue has to be a lie. People can be wrong sometimes.
Why would Drinker do that?
Because he got something wrong.
Is he incompetent? Or is he a blatant liar?
Hey, that first one is what I said, except far more needlessly antagonistic.
These are the only two choices you have, and both of them are damning for his reputation.
I would not say that not realizing that a branch breaking at the beginning of one scene and at the end of another almost identical scene is damning. That is getting one thing wrong. Something tells me that in all the videos you've made about cinema sins, you've gotten at least one thing wrong. Hell, in this video, you've gotten things wrong. Things that I would consider far more damning than not realizing when a branch broke. You've literally interpreted sentences as meaning the opposite of what they actually meant, as well as just inventing statements that nobody actually said.
And if all that wasn't enough to prove that Mr. Jordan has the integrity of a sandcastle, here's something that was brought to my attention. On one of Drinker's live streams, he attributed a false quote to Isabella Merced about the failure of Madame Web.
Some of the stars of the film have got theories about why that is, and one of them is right here. Isabella Merced? Is that the word? Merced?
Sure. Yeah.
She said it failed for one simple reason. For the same reason that The Marvels or Bird of Prey failed, because the male audience still hides a deep contempt for everything that is starring strong, independent women.
Oh, God. The truth is the truth, I guess.
Sure. I mean, that's definitely the reason Birds of Prey failed and The Marvels. It wasn't because they were bad films that no one wanted. For sure.
Isabella was, of course, inundated with hate from parrots that took these quotes at face value because why would grifters lie to them? She then had to come out and deny these clearly false allegations, but by then, the damage was already done. To date, there has been no update, no retraction, no public apology on Twitter from Will Jordan for spreading this quote.
Does he know? Did anyone tell him? If he thought the quote was real before, he's not going to magically start thinking it's fake now. Someone has to tell him. Did you tell him? If you're so invested in getting the truth out there, like, did you tell him? Did anyone tell him? Why didn't anyone tell him? I could tell him.
Idioticin says,
no one ever gets my fucking name right.
Not sure if anyone told you, but good news. The quote from Isabella Merced saying Madame Web failed because of sexism turned out to not be real.
There we go. I told him. I have officially done more for women in the film industry than Birdman ever has.
That's $10 I'm not getting back.
Birdman, if you're watching this, you owe me $10.
And that's because he has a vested interest in seeing the culture war proliferate in media discourse.
Culture war is where you compare a scene from a movie to a scene from the remake of that movie and say one movie did it better. That's what culture war is.
As this is profitable for him. Even if he didn't know the quote was fake, this shows the lack of research and effort he puts into his work. No discernment, no ability to perform an investigation, and hastily attributes an obviously fake quote.
Wait, what makes that quote obviously fake? Like, it's fake, but why would somebody look at this quote just in a void and based on the quote itself go, oh, there's no way a real person would say this? What's unrealistic about someone blaming people not liking a movie on misogyny? You've done that in this video.
In a concerted effort to confirm his biases. Why would you take anything he says seriously at this point? How can you trust he's done the homework?
So this is the fun part about responding to this video anachronistically. The very first thing that Birdman shows in his video is a fake quote. This quote from Joseph Goebbels does not actually exist. He didn't actually say that. It is commonly misattributed to him. Now, it's not the end of the world, because this does seem like something a Nazi propagandist would say. It gets spread around a lot by people as if it's real. But if you're not going to let people get away with accidentally spreading a fake quote from a celebrity that came out like a week ago in an off-the-cuff live stream, then I'm not going to let you get away with using a fake quote from a long-dead historical figure who is very easily Googleable in your scripted video. Why would you take anything he says seriously at this point? How can you tell he's done the homework? Also, check out the quote being attributed to a fucking Nazi. Like, to really drive home that this movie reviewer is using the same tactics as the Nazis. Like, the Nazis did not invent lying. It is a very common failing in human nature. Frankie Muniz was not storming the beaches of Normandy when he made Big Fat Liar.
Also, I can't shake the feeling that the script is doing everything in its power to play down Peter Parker, like it's afraid the audience will somehow start rooting for him over Miles if he's shown to be too capable and confident. The first movie portrayed him as an aging, burned out loser who only redeems himself at the end, while the second film morphs him into a bumbling, hapless father in a pink bathrobe who for some reason keeps taking his baby along on life-threatening adventures despite having a perfectly capable mother at home to look after it. Is this some weird attempt to mock and belittle the Spider-Man that most people know and love, who incidentally just happens to be the only straight white man in the entire movie? I don't know, man, it just kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, that's all.
The first thing you'll notice if you've seen that movie is that he's just blatantly incorrect. Peter B. Parker is not the only straight white male in the film. In fact, there are many of them, quite a few of them variants of Peter Parker himself.
Oh ho ho ho, joke's on you, Chud. You thought it was just Peter Parker, but it was also Peter Parker, and this stupid clone of Peter Parker, and these hundreds of duplicates of Peter Parker, all of whom only exist to fill up crowd shots, and then try to kill a teenager at the end of the movie. Listen, next time anybody ever says that they feel like Star Wars needs to have more minority representation, I'll make sure to tell them that actually 99% of the movie's cast are Maori. See, it's actually a really good thing that I made that joke, because the last time I talked about clone troopers, I thought it was pronounced Maori and not Maori, so it's very important that I rectified that mistake. I've redeemed myself.
More importantly, there is a prominent supporting character that is the motivation for Spider-Gwen's entire arc in the film, Captain Stacy.
Oh, yeah, the antagonist of her arc in the film. The one who points a gun at his daughter's face. Yeah, remember what you were saying earlier about how messed up it is to want representation, but only for the villains?
The next issue you might see is the claim that Peter is being irresponsible by bringing his daughter on, and I quote, life-threatening adventures despite having a perfectly capable mother at home. Again, if you've watched this movie, you'd know that Peter's presence in the film was entirely to be a familiar face for Miles and to help him accept his canon event, not go on a life-threatening adventure.
Yeah, and then at the end of the movie, he brings his daughter on a life-threatening mission. What's your point? Like, I don't even agree with this take. I think what's more likely what happened with Peter is that after the first movie where they portrayed him at like his absolute lowest point in his life, they kind of just decided they wanted to recreate that same vibe with him in the next movie, even though the first movie ends with him getting back on his grind. Even the bathrobe he had seemed like an attempt to like recreate the silhouette of the trench coat he had in the first movie. And they put his daughter in there, 1, to show that he had a kid, just like he said he was going to have in the first movie. 2, like you said, so that he could use his daughter to relate to Miles. And then once they decided that she was going to be in the movie, they decided to just keep throwing her into every scene Peter was in because she's a cute baby and people like cute babies. Peter is also probably going to play a lot more of an active role in the third movie, given the ending of the second one. That seems to be the main reason why, like, the entire main cast from the first movie, outside of Gwen, isn't really in the second one that much. It seems like they're saving them for the third movie. That is, you know, if movie number 3 even happens at this point. And I think there's a case to be made for him bringing his daughter on the big train chase, because he initially had his daughter on him just because there was nothing bad going on in the spider hub. And then he got caught off guard by that chase happening, so even though bringing his daughter on that chase is dangerous, you could argue that he figured it was more safe to bring her with him, where he could at least look after her, than to leave her unattended in a base that's currently being controlled by someone who's okay with killing innocent people, possibly even killing children, because he thinks it's going to save the universe. That doesn't justify why he brings her at the end of the movie, which, once again, I presume the reason why is because they want a cute baby in their third movie doing Spider-Man stuff. But like, Spider-Man, the fully grown adult human man, can be killed by a gun. And she's a baby. Like, once he actually got the option to drop her off somewhere else, he should have.
Moreover, May Parker has superpowers, and her dad would likely be the only one in the relationship physically capable of corralling the clearly energetic child.
That is actually the first time I've heard someone make that argument, as for why it would be better for Peter to bring her with him at the end of the movie than to leave her at home. I've heard a lot of people argue that he shouldn't have brought her. I've never heard that as a response. That is actually probably the best argument you could make as to why he would bring her. Still, it would have been nice to have something in the movie saying that. Maybe it'll happen in the third movie. Because you do have to wonder, like, have Peter and MJ not thought of any way that MJ could take care of the kid when Peter's not there? What were they going to do before they met Miguel? Like, does MJ just have to have Peter in the room with her 100% of the time if the kid's there? Have they not worked something out? Like, does Peter not sleep? Once again, maybe they'll have a perfectly great explanation for it in the third movie, but it would have been nice to have it in the movie that exists right now. Regardless, I don't think it's unreasonable that somebody wouldn't have thought of that. I didn't think of that. You're the first person I've heard say that. Good on you, Chief. This might be the only W you have in this video.
What's more is he brought her to probably the safest environment she could possibly be, a hub with a million other superheroes.
Yeah, and then at the end of the movie, he brings her into an alternate universe where he's going to get into fistfights with people with superpowers.
The less obvious observation is that Will is a race baiter. The Spider-Verse films, while featuring a black protagonist, do not contain the themes of race relations.
Well, he never said they did. He never made the claim that there's a statement in the movie itself about race. The thing he said might have happened, he didn't even say it happened for sure, was that the motivations they might have had behind the scenes for why they did what they did with Peter in that movie might have been motivated by race. Because we've seen people in Hollywood make public statements that that's a motivation that they have. Probably the most overt one that I can pull off the top of my head is the time they said that Doctor Strange was supposed to show up at the end of WandaVision, you know, to do his job of stopping bad things from happening with magic, but then they decided against it because he was a white man, letting a white person get away with slavery to pwn the whites, I guess. I don't know if that's made more or less funny by them making Wong Sorcerer Supreme in the next movie Doctor Strange showed up in. Like, why didn't Wong stop her? He's not white. What's the square up between Asian man and white woman? Isn't movie making magical? As far as I'm aware, nobody working on Spider-Verse has said something like that. This is definitely the biggest stretch that he's made so far. You could make the case that it's like a general sentiment going around Hollywood right now, and therefore it's reasonable to assume that it happened this time too. But I don't want to make that kind of jump, because then you'll just be here all day pointing at different movies and being like, ah, this is the same thing they did to Doctor Strange. But you're wrong if you think that there's no precedent for something like this. There's precedent, I just think it's a bit of a stretch. And once again, he didn't even say it, like, conclusively. He said maybe.
The more astute of you will then ask, well, why even bring that up at all? And therein lies the problem. Will's goal with many of his film reviews—
that is not a screenshot from one of his film reviews. That seems to be a thumbnail from a video made by a completely different person named Trigonometry, which, I've heard worse puns. Like, he doesn't control what the thumbnail is in someone else's YouTube video talking about him.
Is to galvanize his mostly male, mostly white, and mostly straight audience.
Hey, remember when you said the villains in a movie all being white made perfect sense because it matched up with real-life statistics about race? Well, I think it makes sense that his audience is
mostly male, mostly white, and mostly straight.
Because most people are mostly straight. English-speaking people are mostly white, and his videos are in English, and most people on YouTube are mostly male. And you still haven't actually proven that it's even true about his audience, you just assumed it. Wait, hold on, I don't even need to say any of this. I got a clip of someone else proving me right.
LeftTube generally, I mean, honestly, LeftTube is not different from any other vertical on YouTube. YouTube in general is very white.
5 years on, and I'm still getting mileage out of that Cat Black clip. Thanks, Cat. Love ya. This is a very strange thing for you to do, given that you just called someone a race baiter for caring too much about the demographics of a movie.
Around the idea that they are being attacked for being those three things. You do this often enough, and the audience will begin to believe it. Hence, that atrocious reading of Across the Spider-Verse. I mean, he publicly demonstrates that he can't keep up with basic logic all the time. Look at this tweet from Star Wars Holocron. They are very obviously making the point that sometimes a show's first season isn't always where it finally ends up, with a couple examples including The Clone Wars and Breaking Bad. When Will saw this, I mean, how do you fail at understanding the point this hard?
No, he understood the point. He just thought it was stupid. Because it's stupid. The first season of Breaking Bad is good. It was given subsequent seasons because the first season showed promise. Even if the first season isn't as good as the later seasons, it was still good enough to warrant continuing the show. Like, yeah, hypothetically, if a season 2 of The Acolyte had been made and it had been like absolute Kino, then I guess the analogy would technically work. They would both be shows that start off not as good and then end up being better, but the degree of magnitude would be so much greater between Acolyte Season 1 and a hypothetical really good Acolyte Season 2, and Breaking Bad Season 1 and Breaking Bad Season 2. It's like that time Dark Viper AU compared Critical committing copyright infringement to date rape.
He basically compares reactors to sexual abuse criminals and insinuates that they'd be likely to spike your drink at a party, take silence for consent, basically is comparing React content creators to rapists. He really doubles down, puts his nuts on the table and says, yeah, reactors are likely to commit sexual abuse. He says it's hyperbole, but only slightly so. The difference between actively ignoring consent for financial gain is not so far removed from ignoring consent for sexual gratification.
Like, yeah, the analogy technically works, but one thing is so much more severe than the other that it doesn't really track.
This is one of two things. He either understands the point being made, but is attempting to misrepresent the point to, again, galvanize an already volatile audience against a contentious product, thereby sending his parrots to harass this account.
Harassment is when you quote tweet someone and say that they're wrong.
Which actually fucking happened.
Oh no, 2 people One person disagreed with it, and the other person said, "Go fuck yourself." I really hope you've never said something so inflammatory to someone.
This is another common through line, is just taking any sort of vaguely negative thing a person says or does to another person and interpreting it as harassment, when that's a standard you would apply to pretty much no other person. Like, have you been harassing the people who make cinema sins when you made 1 burdillion YouTube videos about them?
Or he doesn't understand the purpose of an analogy. Stupid people do this all the time. You'll say, well, fish swim and Olympic sprinters run, with the underlying logic being how they locomote, and the stupidest person you know will say, did you just compare a fish to an Olympian? And this is exactly why analogies are on IQ tests. But I'm willing to be charitable to Will and suggest it's the former, that he knows the point that's being made but is misrepresenting it to fit the narrative he's trying to push. I mean, the alternative is to suggest he's low IQ. And I would never do that.
Oh, just call him retarded already, you fucking coward. Stop doing that thing that people do where they call someone retarded but they don't say the word retarded, that way it's technically not ableist.
Listen to this incredible leap in logic for Godzilla vs. Kong.
And oh look, Kong's been abducted from his homeland and taken across the ocean to America in chains. I mean, there's on-the-nose writing, and then there's next-level stuff like this. I wonder who you're supposed to sympathize with here.
Yes, Drinker just called African slaves apes.
He did not call African slaves apes. He said one ape, specifically a sapient humanoid ape the audience is meant to sympathize with, seemed to be getting portrayed similarly to African slaves because he was enslaved. And not only enslaved, but being brought on a boat to a new continent. Yet another positive of responding to this video anachronistically. I can put the section from before, where you called him retarded for not understanding an analogy, next to this section, where you don't understand an analogy. Not that I would call you retarded or anything, that would be mean. Thank you for the emoji, so I know what I'm supposed to think about this. You have portrayed him as the soy jack and yourself as the Chad. Almost literally, I mean, damn, look at this dude. While we're on the subject, why aren't you a bird?
Just look at that dog! No! You named him D-Dog, but it's obvious anyone could see that's a wolf!
And tried to frame it as the screenwriters doing so. That, my children, is what we in the English-speaking world call projection.
Also, another thing, this is not a take that's unique to him. King Kong has been getting interpreted as an allegory for black people since the first movie by anti-racist activists. See, look at that, it's right there on the Wikipedia page. And look, if having the same opinion of the Minecraft movie trailer as a white supremacist makes you a white supremacist, then this must make this guy like Scottish Martin Luther King. I don't know, man, when a character's been getting criticized for almost a century by other film critics for being a racist allegory for black people, and then his new movie has people enslave him, put him in chains, and carry him from one continent to another on a boat. Like, even if that's not what the movie's going for, is it not unreasonable that somebody might see that?
And like almost every observation this guy makes, it's hilariously wrong. They're not even taking Kong to America. They're going to Antarctica in this scene.
Yeah, the reason for that is because this isn't a video about Godzilla vs. Kong. This is a video about the trailer for Godzilla vs. Kong. He didn't know what continent they were going to, because the movie didn't exist yet. This whole thing was a prediction, because that's what you do when you watch a movie trailer. You predict what the movie's going to be like, based off of what the trailer shows you. Yeah, his video about the actual movie makes no reference to this, because now he has the actual movie to judge, and not just the trailer to judge. Of course, you didn't show that it was the trailer and not the movie because, well, because you're a liar. You didn't get that title on top of the video effect you had earlier to shout out your buddy. Also, does slavery stop being slavery when you go to a continent other than North America? Theoretically, if this movie actually had a slavery allegory in it, well, not even allegory, there was actual slavery in it. They did, in fact, enslave Kong. The question is just whether that was done purely as a pragmatic thing, or if it was meant to be an allegory for real-life slavery. Would the allegory be completely defeated by the fact that the sapient creature who was chained up on a boat and brought to a new continent was brought to a different continent than the one that slaves were usually brought to? Were the people bringing him to Antarctica American? Also, weren't you the guy who said he was supposed to be able to tell the exact political messaging of the Barbie movie because a bitch foot changed shape? Maybe that's what that movie was missing. Maybe he should have been able to tell that the movie had no slavery allegories in it because Kong's foot didn't change shape. Once again, I want to see the alternate universe where this movie actually did have a transatlantic slave trade allegory in it and he complained about it. Because I feel like you would say, well, yeah, of course, obviously it had that. Didn't you see the trailer? They chained him up and put him on a boat. Don't you have any media literacy? Also, his feet changed shape. Why did I turn into Jordan Peterson for that?
So not only did he get the scene wrong, he saw racial themes in a film where there are none because his brain immediately goes to black people when he sees an ape in chains.
More so that his brain goes to chains when he sees chains. Once again, to sum it up, the key part was not ape to people, it was chains to chains. Also being brought to another continent on a boat. You forgot about that part. You remembered it when you were criticizing which continent it was, but you forgot it now.
Alright, so I've been sitting on this bit of lore for a minute. You remember ActualFandom, a friend of Organized Chaos, both of whom friends of Birdman. ActualFandom called a black man a monkey once.
Someone want to know why you called Eric July a chunky monkey?
Oh, that's me.
Ooh, that sounds...
Well,
oh,
because it
man.
was...
that sounds
I was
way
referencing... I was
worse than
actually
sexism.
quoting Iron Man 3 whenever I said it. And yeah, I mean, the presumption there is that it's a racist term, and it's not. You can look it up.
Not just any type of monkey. To his credit, it was a chunky monkey. And to his credit, he was quoting Iron Man 3. But you see, he has a black friend. And that black friend was in chat when it happened. And they had a good laugh about it.
Yeah, I don't think... I agree. I don't think you meant it in a racial
and
context
also,
either.
why am I being canceled for that, right? You know what I mean?
Well, but see,
I'm
but
not
let
in favor
me
of
cancel
canceling
culture.
you.
Am I
let me
right?
explain why I think people fixate on it. I think people fixate on it because they feel like that you do the same thing where you see someone say something that's a joke or they make a comment and you assume a sort of negative racist
I'll put it this way.
intention.
No,
when
you're
maybe there
okay.
wasn't
That's
one.
fair enough. But yeah, that's being charitable. I'll tell you this. Once it was said, well, the person that brought it up in my chat is my friend, and I hate to do the I have a black friend thing, but he was jokingly pointing it out because he knew that it's not racist. He said, "Oh, you better not." And I said, "Ah, dude." And then I was like, later, I was like, "I bet somebody's gonna fucking." Anyway.
To belabor this point, he's been caught changing the titles of his videos after a media property releases.
Yeah, can you blame him? When people like you take his videos about trailers and pretend that they're videos about the movie itself?
To hide his terrible perception of marketing material.
What is he hiding? The lengths of those videos are exactly the same. He didn't cut anything out. Whatever was in that video is still in that video. The only difference is, back when the trailer was the only thing that was out, he could make videos on the trailer and everyone would know they were about the trailer. Even if people like you weren't lying about him, it would still make sense for him to change the title on his trailer video. That way people know it's a trailer video and not a video on the main show. And what terrible perception is he hiding there? The original title says, Why Nobody Cares About House of the Dragon. If the number of people who cared about House of the Dragon was increased by the show coming out, that wouldn't make his initial take more wrong. Like, have you forgotten what happened with the Game of Thrones? One of the most popular shows ever at the time it was coming out? It completely killed, like, its entire cultural footprint by having an ending that was universally hated. Any goodwill that House of the Dragon got, it had to claw back after Game of Thrones, like, burned the ground it was built on.
His Twitter alone is an embarrassment of narrative pushes from platform-boosting known anti-black racists like Kang Min Lee.
I have no idea who that guy is. Are you going to tell me who he is? Because I don't know, and I don't know that he knows either. Like, do you know how Twitter works? Things just show up on your timeline. You have a clip from Destiny in your video. Do you agree with everything Destiny's ever said? Even before the, sex crime allegations?
To even shit-talking PETA.
Good. Everyone has.
Because he perceives them to be left-wing, I guess?
No, because they're stupid and they say it's stupid. Really? You're going to bat for PETA? Everyone has made fun of PETA. He technically didn't even go after PETA. He made a joke about how it's easier to kill a chicken than to kill a dinosaur. You've gotten it into your head so much that he only ever criticizes things that are left-wing to push some sort of right-wing agenda. That when he makes a joke about something that everyone has made fun of, when you can't pigeonhole it into a left versus right thing, you just sit here like mad at him for not going after something that was left-wing. You get mad at him for not being the villain you built him up to be in your head. You'd see him get asked super salad at a restaurant, and when he says soup, you'd be like, oh, so salad is left-wing now?
In fact, you'll never see him talking about or promoting anything that's not mainstream unless it's an attempt at a narrative push. So yeah, he'll talk about Squid Game or Kingdom because they're mainstream, but do any of you believe he cares about Korean media at all?
Oh, I'm glad you're here to call out people for only going after popular topics. Guy who built his whole channel off of telling people time after time after time that CinemaSins is bad.
Because Korean women are probably some of the most feminist on earth.
Oh, are their feet changing shape? And the article used to prove this is an article saying that anti-feminism has swept South Korea. I don't know if you know what anti means.
To the point that it heavily contributes to their birth rate decline.
Weird flex, but okay. I guess this does technically prove what you're saying more than the previous article did. So you're 1 against 1 now. Although, if your point is that he's not going to talk about this because he only wants to talk about things that push some sort of right-wing narrative, wouldn't this be kind of perfect? Ah, look, South Korean movies are full of feminism and now they don't have babies anymore. This seems like the exact sort of thing you'd want to focus on if your movie review channel isn't actually about movies and is really about pushing a political message. It's probably why you brought it up.
And the swath of strong female protagonists that permeate Korean media properties?
To be fair, she's a villain, but I've been watching this drama and she's great. You had one example. You had to get one example of a strong female lead in a Korean series and you couldn't do it. You got a villain. Remember what you said earlier about the I have black friends defense? Apparently any strong female leads that this guy likes isn't enough to stop you from accusing him of hating strong female leads, and really of hating women in general. But you can use one strong female character, who isn't even portrayed in a positive light, she's a villain, and that works for
the entire nation of South Korea.
He has no idea because he can only regurgitate talking points against what's in the mainstream because you can't grift on things people don't know about.
Yes, you can. According to you, he makes up lies about stuff. It's easier to lie about things if people don't already know the truth about them. If his goal is to push some sort of political narrative through movies, he'd be better off not using movies that everybody's already seen and knows about, and instead pointing to some, like, vast swath of movies that he could just claim anything about. You know, like how you do.
This is why his review for season 4 of The Boys is what it is. He admits he hasn't even watched it.
Oh, so it's not a review then. He's upfront about the fact that he hasn't watched it. It's not trying to pass itself off as a review of something he's watched.
Yet claims it has destroyed its audience. His source being the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
I mean, the audience score would be a good place to start when trying to find out what happened to a show's audience, yes.
So, it was off to Rotten Tomatoes for me to check out the reviews. Not the critic reviews, of course, because nobody in their right mind gives a shit what those fucking shills have got to say about anything anymore.
True.
I'm talking about the audience reviews, which is the only semi-reliable barometer for quality these days, and oh.
Besides the fact that TV show reviews on Rotten Tomatoes aren't verified, meaning they are subject to review bombs.
I mean, he did say semi-reliable, not entirely reliable.
Why doesn't he keep this same energy with, oh, I don't know, The Marvels, Black Widow?
Oh, because they star women, right?
Or Quantumania.
Oh, you know, good on you for not going down that path. I'm proud of you.
Movies that have pretty good audience scores.
Once again, he did say semi-reliable. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, which is hard not to do when you've sounded like a broken record so much, thus causing me to have to sound like a broken record when talking to you, you'll say that him liking any given female character isn't enough to stop you from accusing him of hating female characters. But him saying one time, I think the audience score is more reliable than the reviewer score, is enough for you to conclude that he thinks the audience score is gospel. And to answer your question, I don't really know what this guy would say about these movies' audience and critic scores. He didn't show me what he said about them. I could tell you what I think, which is that the only people still reviewing Marvel movies are people who still like Marvel movies. The main talking point nowadays about the decline of Marvel movies, outside of them just being bad, has been that they're getting, like, diminishing returns. Captain Marvel 1 made $1 billion. The Marvels made, like, $12 and a ham sandwich. Meanwhile, something like The Boys has had good reviews for the first 3 seasons. More and more people started to feel like it was diminishing in quality from seasons 2 to 3. And then season 4 gets bad reviews from an audience that normally gives it good reviews. If I had to choose a Marvel equivalent to this, I'd probably choose Secret Invasion. That was a case that you'd look at and go, wow, even the Marvel fans don't like this Marvel project. Like, I really doubt that his video is just him saying, it got bad reviews, therefore it's bad, the end. I imagine he'd go into more detail about why he thinks an audience that previously gave it good reviews is now giving it bad reviews. The audience score is the jumping off point for the discussion, it's not the discussion itself. Like, I haven't watched season 4 of this show either, but I've seen people who are still watching it have complaints about it when they previously liked it. Namely about the part where it makes light of Huey getting raped.
Seems like Drinker is the living embodiment of this meme, doesn't it?
How do I phrase this? Nuh-uh. You have not shown that. You've got 8 things on this list. You've shown him doing the thing where he says the audience agrees this is trash. And even then, I feel like you're being reductive with that one. And then you think you've shown an example of him doing the top right one, where he reviews a movie negatively, even though the critic and audience score is good. But once again, you haven't shown him say anything about those audience scores or critic scores. For all I know, he didn't bring up the scores at all and just reviewed those movies negatively the normal way. Really, I'm taking your word for it that he even reviewed those movies negatively at all. There's still the entire rest of this list that you haven't showed him doing. You have based all of this off of one time where he said, I think the audience score is more reliable than the critic score, in his video about how a show destroyed its audience.
So I bring you back to this tweet. What do you honestly think he's saying here?
That the movie looks cringe. That is the universally had take about this movie. That's what this whole video was. Remember, the original premise was that this tweet was so racist that you could see how racist it was just by looking at it. And now he's made this whole video, in addition to that part of his previous video, to give you the real, true background information that you actually need in order to fully understand why this tweet about the Minecraft movie being cringe was racist.
Most of the rest of this video is just him summarizing his same conclusions from earlier, so I'll skip over that part, though I will stop on this one part of his summary.
That he perceives women being in these roles to be a political push.
No, that's the opposite of what happened. You criticized him for not thinking that the movie was going to be a political push. He said that he thought the movie was just going to be a fun movie about a toy that comes to life. You called him retarded for not thinking it was going to be a political push because Barbie's feet changed shape in the trailer.
What this person does is not honest critique. He looks for ways he can jimmy in alt-right political talking points under the guise of being a movie reviewer.
I'm sorry, alt-right? What part of any of these movie reviews, even if we take like all of your interpretations of what he said as being true, support the idea of starting a white ethno-state? Unless you're using alt-right the way that a lot of people use it, where it doesn't actually refer to a specific ideology and it just means like right-winger I don't like who's really spooky and like super duper bad. In which case, once again, even if everything you've said about him is true, which one of these takes is like any worse than your typical like boomer uncle who starts arguments at Thanksgiving?
You see they're putting gay people in Marvel movies now? I mean, I got nothing against the lifestyle, I just think this political correctness stuff is getting out of hand.
Uncle Harold, I think you want to gas the Jews.
And I know his fan base doesn't want to believe that he is prejudiced against minority groups, but after everything you've seen here, if you're an honest person, you're at the very least asking questions.
See, that's a question. I'm asking questions then.
This is because he's not a film reviewer. He's a political ideologue that complains almost exclusively about mainstream media to push rhetoric. Of course, he'll never come out and say, I don't want to see black people in lead roles, or I'm tired of female protagonists, like The Quartering stupidly did.
Worst performing film on Memorial Day in 30 years, needs over $500 million to break even, only made $31 million. Despite great reviews, people are sick of female protagonists. So he didn't say he was sick of female protagonists. He said other people were sick of female protagonists, which may or may not be true. You can think he's wrong or right on that analysis, but like, you had one job. You had to find a picture of a guy who says, I don't like female protagonists in movies, and you couldn't even do that. Instead, you had a guy saying that people didn't go out and watch a movie because they don't like female protagonists. You dumb motherfucker! How did you pick a fight with The Quartering and lose?
To maintain the facade of plausible deniability.
I'm really glad that you took that screenshot of Agent Smith from The Matrix saying that's the sound of inevitability, and then didn't properly crop it and then put impact font text over it saying that's the sound of plausible deniability to go along with you saying the words plausible deniability. That really helped aid your point. That No, Luke, I am your plausible deniability. Get a job, you fucking loser. God, this guy gives off such like a not fun at parties vibe. Also, he sounds like Vosh.
And Will, I know you're watching.
How do you know that? Does he have a history of like hate watching videos that are made by people who hate watch him? Or did you just make up in your own head that he's watching your video and then immediately assumed it was true?
So let me finally address you directly.
I mean, if he's watching this video, then everything you said would be addressed to him because he'd be watching it.
Film reviews are not your personal soapbox to air out your grievances with minority groups.
That is true.
And those that advocate for them.
Well, hold on. Those that advocate for them is a different thing. Because what if the people advocating for minority groups do a bad job of it? Would it not then be fair to criticize the people advocating for minority groups? I guess you could say that that's still out of place in movie reviews, but what if the movie is trying to advocate for a minority group and then the movie does a bad job? Then is it allowed in a movie review?
I think I speak on behalf of every reasonable film reviewer out there.
Thinking you speak on behalf of every reasonable person is famously a trait of unreasonable people.
Go away now.
Dude, you fucking got him. You fucking got him good.
Birdman has made another video after this one called What is Grifting, where he answers the common question of how do you know that someone's grifting and not just wrong, by explaining that he actually has his own different meaning of grifting. You'd think that if he's using an obscure definition of the word that's different from what everyone knows it to mean and isn't what you would find in a dictionary defining the term, then he'd have made that video first, rather than just assuming people would know what he means in his series about grifting.
The term grifter traditionally refers to someone who engages in schemes for financial or material gain, often involving deceit. Opinions can't be grifting, right? Well, when we call these people grifters, it's a shorthand for media grifter, which is a different kind of grifter.
There was actually a secret silent adjective tacked on to the beginning of the word grifting every time he was saying it. I find this very funny because him saying that people who say stuff that's wrong about movies makes them a media grifter rather than a regular one would imply that he thinks that a normal grifter has to be someone who lies, while a media grifter is someone who just gets things wrong. So his tolerance for people who spread misinformation about movies is actually lower than his tolerance for people who spread misinformation about real life. Or at least that's what I would say, except his definition of media grifter is this.
A media grifter engages in the dissemination of false or misleading information, not necessarily out of genuine belief, but as a calculated move to attract attention, provoke outrage, and maintain relevance in the media landscape.
So his answer to the question of how are they a grifter if grifting requires lying, and they might not be lying, they might just be wrong, is actually there's a different kind of grifter. And his definition of that type of grifter includes lying about stuff. So we're just back to square one. He also denies accusations that he himself is a grifter on the basis that in order to be a grifter, you have to have popular opinions, which is also not in the definition of grifter, the real one or the one he uses. And he actually has unpopular opinions.
I've made arguments for positions that were relatively unpopular or outright against the consensus. For example, I have videos explaining that the hatred for Resident Evil 3 is misguided, that Thanos is a better villain than Heath Ledger's Joker, that Phase 4 of the MCU is not that bad, and that the first Venom movie is kind of one of the worst comic book films of all time. My point is, I've never been afraid of standing up to the popularly held belief, and that's precisely what makes me the anti-grifter. I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. So you see, the attempts at calling me a grifter are not only unfounded, they're just another form of anti-intellectualism.
From the people who brought you, I can't be racist, I have black friends, comes, I can't be a grifter, I thought Venom sucked. Like, dog, in this same video, you used flat earthers as an example of grifters. For this video, I had to watch a good handful of drinkers' videos, and I couldn't help but get struck by how, like, mundane they are compared to what they're being painted as. Like, each clip that's been shown in Birdman's video is one clip from an otherwise normal movie review. He spends 99% of his time talking about whether or not the plot was good, whether or not the characters were good, whether or not the visuals were good, whether or not the music was good. And then sometimes he'll bring up something about what he thinks might be like a political message in the movie. And so if you just string all of those clips together, you can paint a picture of someone who only ever talks about politics. Or, as we've seen here, you can take things he says that aren't about politics and just say that they probably were about politics on the basis of, come on, guys, we all know what's really going on here. Because you've daisy-chained it back to, like, one hot take he had once. And that's not to mention the things he said that have been, like, outright progressive.
And it all just reminds me of what a fucking good actor she is when she has good material to work with. I mean, let's be honest, when most actresses get to a certain age, interest in high-profile roles start to dry up pretty rapidly, but this movie proves just how flawed that thinking really is. The local sheriff, on the other hand, is a Muslim, a moderate and rational man who's tolerant of other faiths, but as his son gets seduced by the miracles taking place at the nearby church, he's at a loss to argue against it. But it's an interesting new perspective from an industry that usually portrays Muslims as fanatical, unthinking zealots, but again, the script never really tries to elevate one particular religion over another. It just offers them up as different perspectives on the same fundamental question, and even suggests that they might have a lot more in common than not. Woke. If there's one word I could choose to erase from the English language, it would probably be that. It's a word that I try to avoid in my own reviews as much as possible, because just like racism and sexism, it's been overused so much over the past few years that it's basically lost all meaning and relevance.
Right, I forgot. All of that is just cover-up for his secret racism. All the things he says that could be interpreted as progressive are actually just a cover for him not being progressive. And all the things he says that are just normal movie review opinions are also cover for him not being progressive. The 99% of his content, his reviews and his streams, it's all being done to prop up the other 1%. He talks about movies that were really hard to make, and interviews actors and directors, all just to cover up for his racism. But you couldn't be dishonest, because you said Venom is bad. Like, if all of that's really true, if he's built up like hundreds and hundreds of hours of like perfectly normal movie review content, all just to hold up this little snippet of like secret racism, I say we should just let him have it. We should just let him turn people racist. Like, at this point, he's earned it. He's put in the work. So how much of what the Birdman says makes someone a grifter does the Birdman himself do? Well, we've got him using a fake quote. We've got him sharing statements from problematic people. We've got him reading political meanings into mundane movie trailers. We've got him using one example of a show with a strong female lead in it to prove that he likes shows with strong female leads in them. We've got him not understanding analogies. And what else is on the list? Do we have him using talking points associated with the far right? Well, he's claimed that he's not political, and he actually criticizes both the left and the right. He says that his allegiance is to facts and logic. He's insulted someone by implying that they're a gay sex worker. He's very quick to bring up statistics about the racial breakdowns of certain communities of people. He said feminism caused the country's birth rate to decline. I forgot he said that until I read my notes on that. He has a tendency to insult people by implying that they're low IQ. And he says that his goal is ultimately just to get people to start just asking questions. Now, you may look at some of those things I just listed and say, oh, come on, those things aren't like inherently politically partisan. Anyone can do those. And my response to that would be to say, come on, guys. We all know what he's really doing here. Oh, and he's buddy-buddy with people who call black people monkeys and then say it's okay because their black friend said it was okay. What I'm getting at here is that the Birdman will hold people to standards that he doesn't hold the average person to, that he can't even hold himself to, and that he doesn't hold the people he associates to. And of course, these standards that he holds random YouTubers to are not standards that he holds multi-billion-dollar corporations to. Johnny McMovie Reviewer, who said he didn't like Rey from Star Wars, that guy's pushing a political message for money. But the multi-billion-dollar corporate entity, those guys are fine. This is a case study in somebody just chaining together a bunch of mundane things and using the possibility that they might be connected to something more sinister as proof that they are something more sinister. Like, if this guy actually is all of the things you've accused him of being, you've done a horrible job of proving it. At the end of it all, the only conclusion I can really come to here is that the Birdman is retarded and that he's a whore who sucks white cock. Because this is the type of discussion that we have about movie reviews now. Now I would like to address the Birdman directly, because I know he's watching my video, because I made it up in my own head that he's doing so and immediately believed it. So, Birdman, I wasn't joking about those $10. I actually want you to pay me for that. My PayPal is the same as my YouTube. Give me $10.